morning. I was telling one of the viewers from yesterday's episode, I think it was Jackie Cho, that I was going to wear like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles type looking getup today, but I don't have that tank top clean. I actually do have a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tank top. I think I have two of them, in fact. I have one that has the face of one of the turtles. I'm not sure which one it is. I don't recall off the top of my head. But it wasn't clean, so I decided not to wear it. So I'm wondering if not wondering, I know I haven't. I want to show you this. See that? That's my tattoo on my right bicep. And it's theater masks, like the drama and comedy and tragedy masks, just commonly known as the theater masks. Remember that. Alright, so today we are going to talk fun stuff. Well, it wasn't fun for them. It's intriguing to me about Titanic, because I started watching I can't remember what caught my attention to the subject, but I've always been fascinated by Titanic. As a matter of fact, on my wall in my home above my keyboard, I actually have a blueprint of the layout of Titanic, a framed blueprint from Titanic. It's a replica. It's not a recreation or replica. It's just showing the layout of Titanic. I don't know what you call it, but anyways, I really am fascinated by Titanic, and so I started doing research online in a number of places and found some really interesting details. I actually, about half an hour ago, I finished watching a dramatization of Titanic based on British and U.S. inquiries. So what people may not be aware of when it comes to Titanic is that after the sinking, there were inquiries into who was responsible, where was their poor judgment used, especially with regards to the captain, because they always question the captain. The captain of the Titanic did go down with the ship. His name was Edward Smith. But there's some interesting things I learned about him in my research and through this documentary, or dramatization rather. So, Titanic had a sister ship called the Olympic, and I want to say it went out in 1910 or 1911. It was before Titanic. It had its maiden voyage before Titanic. And the Titanic was still being constructed, and the Olympic was hit, had a collision with another ship, and the captain in charge of the Olympic at that time was Edward Smith, the ultimate captain of the RMS Titanic, because Edward Smith was commonly the captain for all of White Star Lines. White Star Lines is the company that built and owned Titanic and Olympic, and he was almost always the captain for their maiden voyages. Obviously, Titanic being his last, because if he showed up on a ship after that, I think I'd be really freaked out. Anyways, I'm Edward Smith. I'm getting off the boat. Anyway, so after the Olympic had a collision, it was damaged, they took away time from the building of the Titanic to fix the Olympic, which ultimately set back its departure date. Can you imagine how something that also involved Smith delayed a ship from launching that would ultimately cause it to be destroyed because of when it actually ended up going into the water? Apparently, according to what I'm learning, Smith was not necessarily as responsible a captain as he could have been. Just based on the little information I've heard, he was not as attentive to detail, or was very easily manipulated, apparently, by the people who owned White Star Lines, which I guess, from an employment perspective, if you're trying to please your employer, then maybe you would. A lot of people have talked about how Ismay, the guy who was the chairman of White Star Lines, essentially owned Titanic. He was the one who encouraged Smith to speed up in order to make it to New York early, because he thought it would be a great way to make headlines. If instead of arriving in New York the night or the morning, on the morning, I think they were supposed to arrive on the 17th, I can't remember, but instead of arriving then, if they arrived the night before, they would be in the papers, and they would be that much more success for everybody. It was also supposedly supposed to have been Smith's last voyage as a captain. I think they said he was going to retire. But anyway, I found that interesting since he was connected to it. So, here's a little trivia question for you. And I will share the facts later, so you can stay tuned and check that out. With regards to Titanic, who is Dorothy Winifred Brown? And there's 3 facts that I want about her that I will tell you throughout the course of the video. I'll go ahead and give you one now. No, I'm lying. No, I'll give you one. I'm going to give you 4 facts. I want 3 of them in the end. One fact is that Dorothy Winifred Brown, her real name, or her ultimate stage name, was Dorothy Gibson. That's one fact. Alright, so some of the things there's a haunting piece of information about Titanic that I think is really creepy but interesting. So in 1898, an American author named Morgan Robertson wrote a novel called Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, which was about a cruise liner that hit an iceberg in the Atlantic Ocean. And it was a cruise liner hit an iceberg in the Atlantic Ocean, and half of the crew and passengers were killed. And that was written 14 years before the Titanic sailed. It also, in the book, the Titan sailed in April. If you don't know, Titanic started from Southampton on April 12th, 1912, and sank in the morning around, I think it was around 2 in the morning on April 15th, what most Americans know as Tax Day. So that's a piece of interesting information, I thought. see what was the other things. There's a number of other things I found interesting about the Titanic. Oh, if you look at the Titanic in pictures, it has 4 sort of steam, what do you call them? Chimneys is the wrong word, but essentially 4 sort of chimneys, of course. I just can't remember the name off the top of my head. Forgive me. But you could tell because there's 4 of them on the top of the ship. But only 3 of them actually were active for emitting steam for the ship. The 4th one was a dummy. And most ships in those days had 4. The Titanic, they apparently had made it to where it only needed 3. But in order to fit with the expectations of the 4-part chimneys, so to speak, they went ahead and made a 4th one, but it was never used for that. It talked about how this is one of the most fascinating pieces of Titanic history that I've known for a while, which is, and most people don't know this, is if the Titanic had not attempted to veer around the iceberg, but had rather struck it head on, they would have probably survived. Because what happened is when it turned, it scraped the side of the ship and punctured the hull below the waterline and opened up gaps so water could get in. If it had hit head on, it would have probably been contained towards the front of the ship. And if you've heard the stories, I want to say it had 8 watertight. I think it was 8. Don't quote me on that. I think there was 8 watertight sections in below the ship. It could have survived with 4 of them breached, but ultimately ended up being 6. But it wasn't because the watertight doors gave way. It was because the water was rising and the bulkheads were not designed for the pressure of the water. And when the water hit, pressure was too strong. It split the bulkheads and flooded even the watertight containers. And the bulkheads only went up to a certain level on the ship. And it was a design choice because they did not want passengers. Because if they had bulkheads going up the entire span of the ship, I think they said it only went up 2/3 of the ship. I think that's what they said. If it had gone up further, it would have required passengers to take alternative means to get across the full length of the ship. So they chose not to have the bulkheads go up the entire height. And that ultimately ended up being a a fatal choice, design choice. Of course, they weren't expecting it to have the problems it had, but it was just a matter of choice. Something else interesting that is sort of hit or miss conversation about Titanic is the lifeboats. So it is true that they only had lifeboats for half the people on board, but they had actually fewer lifeboats than would have, make sure I say this right. So there was 2,200 people on board Titanic. And the capacity of the ship was actually 3,500. So they were around a little less than 2/3 capacity as far as how many people could have fit on the ship. But there were lifeboats for more than half. If they had filled them, there would have been a little over half of the people would have fit in the boats. And they probably could have fit with more because Supposedly the lifeboats were tested in Belfast with the weight of 70 men, but the capacity was 65 that they would fill the boats to. I suppose because of averages, they didn't want to take a chance if anyone was 20 or 30 pounds over or whatever. Second fact about our trivia question of the day. She appeared in the first movie about the sinking of Titanic a month after the Titanic sank. It was called Saved from the Titanic. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it was primarily because they didn't like the way it congested the look of the ship, the decks, so they chose not to build enough for everyone. Because of course, as the saying, as history goes, they said Titanic was unsinkable. What were some of the other ones? They're interesting. Oh yeah, back in those days, they believed women on the crew were bad luck. So among a 900-person crew, there was only 18 women on the crew. And to their benefit, I guess ultimately, 17 of them survived. So I guess they did a little better than the rest of them. Let's see what some of the other pieces of information I heard. The other one I did not know before this dramatization was that they could have survived. The ship may have survived, but shortly after the iceberg hit and the water started to flood into some of the compartments, it didn't get up enough, and Ismay apparently spoke with the engineer who said, whether he was sort of pushed to say it or whether he just believed it, said that he thought the ship was still worthy of traveling. And so Ismay strongly encouraged the captain to restart the engines. So while some people, there's conflicts as to whether this happened or not, they say that the ship, some people say in the inquiries after the ship sinking, some people said that the ship started moving again. So now how did this cause it to sink? Well, it was already taking on water, and when they put the engines in motion and it was pushing against the water, it was causing it to further push inside the boat, and it caused the watertight areas and the bulkheads to fill up faster. So that caused the ship to take on water 20 times faster than the pumps could remove it. And so if they hadn't started up again, it's possible they may have been able to control the water enough until help had arrived. Now, the other thing interesting about Dorothy is that she was on the very first lifeboat that left the Titanic. She and her mother, but on a boat that could take 65, she was one of 28. And then, let's see what else. It's kind of interesting. And there's just so many interesting facts about it. The wreckage of Titanic was not found until 73 years after the sinking, until 1985. Because apparently when they provided, in addition to the fact that they just, when the water started getting in the boat and it went underwater, it still traveled because gravity, if you want to call it, leverage pulled it down, but it caused it to move. So, but when they originally Morse coded or SOS to out their location, they were 17 kilometers off from where they actually were. So made a difference in finding them. Dorothy also wrote and starred in that movie. It was also the last movie she did. You can use any of those little aspects of that particular one. And she wore the same clothes that she wore the night that the Titanic sank. So there's just so many interesting facts. Like I said, I want 3 about Dorothy based on what I've given you. And I think I've actually given you more. 3 obvious ones that I've said. And it was just so many fascinating things that I really encourage people to go and look. I want to read the book now, Futility, because I'd love to know if there's any more sort of haunting comparisons that for a book that happened 14 years before the actual ship sank. Now, do I believe it's a conspiracy of any kind? Of course not. The most amazing thing sometimes is that reality, that fiction is not always that far from what reality can ultimately create. It's actually really fascinating. Things that you don't believe can happen. It's just one of those wonderful and unbalancing facts of existence. What's the saying? Reality is stranger than fiction. So I hope that you've enjoyed a little bit of this and learned some facts you did not know about Titanic. I do know that originally, I don't know if it ever happened, but I know they were building another Titanic. They said they were going to build the Titanic 2. I don't know if that ever occurred or not, though. I don't know if they finished it. I really never researched it because it never was really that interesting to me. It's almost like, let's take one more shot at this. And I think it was originally going to follow the original course too. But I think history is so fascinating. I think we learn so much. One of my mottos is knowledge is power. And I think a number of people who have been watching these videos and making kind comments have also sort of expressed that they realize how important it is. And it is. It's so important. I do want to address real quickly something that happened in the comments yesterday. And just so you know, within the description, I tell you what the rules are for the trivia challenge. So I'm not 100% solid on all the details of it. Yes, thank you. But I do know that what is normally reported is that the Empire State Building has 102. There is supposedly 103rd floor, but I don't think it's exactly a floor. I think it's so it's not considered a floor. I think they call it a secret floor, but I think it's more of a sort of a slightly raised aspect of the building. I don't think it's an actual floor, but I'm going to research it more. But for the purpose of when I tell you trivia questions and trivia answers, it's not personal, because I don't really know anybody outside of the little snippets you share with me when you make comments. But I go by the answers that I give you based on the research that I've done. So now, am I going to say that my research is 100% perfect? Of course not, because I'm not 100% perfect. I'm like 99.99999 and a half. Just kidding. But so I go by the answers that I give you based on the research I've done. Now, you can correct me, and I'm glad if you do. I'm going to go research the Empire State Building thing, for example, because I am fascinated to know more about that. But as of the time of the video and the knowledge I had, that's the trivia answer I gave, and that's what I go based on. So 102 floors is the actual answer that I'm going with right now. And it's also just knowing that you're staying tuned in the video and hopefully learning something along the way. And if you want to yell at me or write anything in the comments, I don't mind if you disagree with me, by the way. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think it's actually great because it opens conversation, but I'm not looking to. No one has done this, and I'm so absolutely thrilled about it that no one has been rude or anything like that in the comments. Not that you can't be. I guess anybody can do whatever they want. I do support people's right to be rude, but I'm so happy that the people who've been watching these videos are polite people. And I can't really tell you how much I appreciate that. Even if you disagree with me, you can tell me why your perspective is different and why you believe that my information is incorrect, and great. I'd like to learn something along the way as well. So that's it. I won't give you any more. Go have a wonderful day. I lost my train of thought. I will see you soon and be well.